Today, a former Nazi went on trial charged with 300,000 counts of accessory to murder.
A 96-year-old woman is on trial for Nazi war crimes. She's accused of helping murder more than 11,000 people at a concentration camp.
The former SS officer showed little emotion after the case against him was dismissed.
When we think of the most infamous villains of World War II, names like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler instantly come to mind. But lurking behind these notorious figures were others, just as evil, yet their stories remained in the shadows. We're not just revisiting the well-known horrors of the Nazi regime, we're uncovering 10 of the most sinister Nazis you've probably never heard of. From cold-blooded doctors to ruthless administrators, these individuals committed atrocities that are chilling to the core. Be warned, their crimes are terrifying and not for the faint of heart. Number 1. Horst Schuman. Joining the Nazi Party in 1930 and later the SA, Horst Schumann's descent into infamy began in earnest when he led the Euthanasia Institute at Grafeneck in 1940, participating in Hitler's euthanasia program. In July 1941, his notorious journey took him to Auschwitz, where he conducted gruesome X-ray sterilization experiments. His subjects, Jewish men and women, were exposed to intense radiation, causing severe burns and often death. Despite the horrors he inflicted, Schuman evaded capture for years. After the war, he initially hid in plain sight as a sports doctor, until identified as a war criminal in 1951. He fled to Africa, living in Sudan and Ghana before his eventual extradition to Germany in 1966. His trial, however, was disrupted by his health issues, and he was released in 1972, living quietly until his death in 1983. Schumann's story is a harrowing reminder of the depth of human cruelty hidden within the Nazi regime. Number 2. Karl Clauberg. After Horst Schuman, another heinous figure emerges from the depths of Auschwitz, a research gynecologist by the name of Karl Clauberg. Clauberg's descent into infamy began when he accepted Heinrich Himmler's offer to develop a mass sterilization technique. At Auschwitz, he performed excruciating experiments on about 700, mostly Jewish women, injecting toxins into their uteri, causing unbearable pain and, in many cases, death. He continued similar experiments in Ravensbrück concentration camp. Captured by the Soviets post-war, Clauberg was sentenced to 25 years, but was released in 1955 due to a German-Soviet repatriation agreement. His freedom was short-lived as he was rearrested in Germany, but he died in 1957 before his trial could begin. Number 3. Christian Wirth. Before rising to infamy, Christian Wirth was a police officer known for his harsh interrogation techniques. His career took a dark turn as he joined the Nazi Party in 1931 and later the SS in 1939. Wirth played a crucial role in Action T4, the Nazi euthanasia program, where he oversaw the killing of individuals using gas vans and gas chambers, a precursor to the horrors he would later perpetrate in extermination camps. Wirth's sadistic nature earned him nicknames like Christian the Cruel and the Wild Christian. In December 1941, he became the first commander of the Belzec extermination camp, setting a brutal precedent for mass murder. His methods in Belzec were replicated in other death camps like Sobibor and Treblinka. Wirth was notorious for his direct involvement in the killings, often using a whip in the gas chambers. He was feared and loathed, even among SS men, for his extreme cruelty. His reign of terror ended when he was killed by Yugoslav partisans in 1944 near Trieste after the conclusion of Operation Reinhard, leaving behind a legacy of inhumanity and cruelty that exemplified the darkest aspects of the Nazi regime. Number 4. Franz Böhme. Franz Böhme, a Wehrmacht general whose military career descended into appalling war crimes, was a prominent military figure, serving in key positions such as the Deputy Commanding General of the 68th Corps and Commander-in-Chief in German-occupied Norway. However, his legacy is marred by his actions in Serbia during 1941. Under his command, brutal reprisals were carried out against the Serbian population, implementing a horrific policy of killing 100 Serbs for every German killed and 50 for every German wounded. This led to the massacre of thousands of innocent civilians. His final act was as tragic as his career was brutal. After World War II, Böhme was captured and brought before the hostages trial, part of the subsequent Nuremberg trials, charged with war crimes committed in Serbia. Before he could stand trial, Böhme chose to escape judgment through suicide, jumping from the 4th floor of the prison where he was being held. His death marked a dramatic end to a career that had shifted from military command to unfathomable war crimes. Number 5. Bruno Tesch. Bruno Tesch was a German chemist who turned his scientific knowledge to sinister use. Tesch, along with Gerhard Peters and Walter Herdt, was the co-inventor of the insecticide Zyklon B, a chemical weapon originally designed for pest control. However, during the Holocaust, Tesch's company sold vast quantities of Zyklon B, which he knew would be used for the mass extermination of human beings, primarily in concentration camps like Auschwitz. Tesch's involvement in these atrocities came to light when a former bookkeeper, Emil Same, alerted British military authorities to Tesch's travel reports, which detailed discussions about using Zyklon B for killing people. Despite his initial denials of any wrongdoing and claims of ignorance about the use of Zyklon B in concentration camps, evidence against him mounted. Witnesses, including former employees and camp survivors, testified about the gas's use in the mass killings and Tesch's knowledge of these practices. In March 1946, Tesch, along with Karl Weinbacher and Joachim Drosin, stood trial for their war crimes. The prosecution argued convincingly that Tesch was aware that the SS was using Zyklon B for the systemic extermination of human beings and continued to sell the gas for this purpose. In the end, Tesch and Weinbacher were found guilty and sentenced to death, while Drosin was acquitted. Bruno Tesch was executed on May 16, 1946, marking a grim end to his role in one of history's darkest chapters. Number 6. Ludwig Fischer. Fischer was a central figure in enforcing Nazi policies in occupied Poland. His most notorious action was the establishment of the Warsaw Ghetto, a place of immense suffering and deprivation for Polish Jews. Fischer's governance was marked by brutal terror tactics, including mass executions and slave labor. After World War II, he was captured and extradited to Poland, where he was put on trial for his war crimes. In 1947, Fischer was sentenced to death and executed. Number 7. Friedrich Flick. An exemplary industrial power involved in Nazi crimes, Friedrich Flick was a German industrialist who amassed a massive fortune before and after World War II. During the war, his companies made extensive use of slave labor in coal mines and steel plants, contributing to the Nazi war machine. After the war, Flick was arrested, tried, and found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Sentenced to 7 years imprisonment, he was released early in 1950. Remarkably, Flick managed to rebuild his industrial empire, becoming one of West Germany's wealthiest individuals and a prominent figure in the business world until his death in 1972. Number 8. Alfried Krupp. Another industrial giant involved in Nazi war crimes was Alfried Krupp. As head of the Krupp family business during World War II, Krupp was deeply involved in the war effort, with his factories relying heavily on forced labor. His company employed about 100,000 slave laborers, often in brutal conditions, contributing significantly to Nazi Germany's war machinery. Post-war, Krupp faced the consequences of his actions. He was convicted for crimes against humanity and initially sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, under political pressure, his sentence was commuted to time served in 1951. Despite his war crimes, Krupp managed to re-establish his business prominence after his release. Number 9. Hermine Braunsteiner Ryan. a figure known for her direct and brutal actions in the concentration camps, was Hermine Braunsteiner. Ryan. Braunsteiner, an SS guard in Ravensbrück and Majdanek concentration camps, was infamously known as the Stomping Mare. Her cruelty included vicious beatings of prisoners, often to death, and throwing children onto trucks bound for gas chambers. She was also involved in the selections of women and children to be sent to the gas chambers. Braunsteiner's post-war life took a dramatic turn when she emigrated to the United States, becoming a housewife in New York City. Her past caught up with her when Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal traced her down, leading to her extradition to West Germany in 1973. This made her the first Nazi war criminal to be extradited from the United States. Her trial in Düsseldorf, which began in 1975, lasted more than 5 years. In 1981, Braunsteiner was convicted of her complicity in the murders of over 1,000 people and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, due to health reasons, she was released in 1996 and passed away 3 years later. Number 10. Josef Kramer. The last figure in this grim list is Josef Kramer, notoriously known as the Beast of Belsen. He served as the commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau from May to November 1944 and later of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Kramer's brutal leadership at these camps earned him a fearsome reputation. He was directly responsible for the deaths of thousands, overseeing horrific atrocities. After the war, Kramer was captured by the British Army and stood trial for his war crimes. In November 1945, he was convicted and sentenced to death. His execution by hanging in. December 1945 marked the end of his heinous reign, embodying the depth of cruelty and inhumanity within the Nazi regime. But how many more untold stories of villainy remain hidden in the shadows of our past?